This conference will now be recorded.
Thank everyone. This is Erica Branch, the Director for Parkinson Support Center. We are doing our Special Care Partners web series today, and it's Parkinson's Two Sides of the Coin with facilitator Elaine Sanchez. So, Elaine, thank you for being here with us again this Saturday. We have this is our second presentation on the series, and again, we've recorded the first, and so we'll make sure that these remain available to anyone who's interested in seeing them. But I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Elaine.
Thank you so much, Erica. You are doing a tremendous job of continuing to support people through this pandemic and make help available to them. So just big hats off to you, and thank you for doing this. So today's topic is Parkinson's disease, two sides of the same coin. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with the term that if you have seen one case of Parkinson's disease, you've seen one case. And I would propose that the same is true with relationships and marriages. If you have seen one, you have seen one. And each one is unique and different. And how couples manage the physical challenges and the emotional stress of Parkinson's is unique to every single couple. For the purpose of this presentation, I interviewed 4 different couples. 2 of the couples are very close friends of mine and have been friends for a very long time. And in one situation, I only know the wife, and in the fourth situation, it's a couple that they are new to me, but they just touched my heart so much. So I want to talk to you first about Ted and Emma. They were married in 1970. Ted was 17 years older than Emma. He was ambitious, he was bright, he worked very hard, and he became incredibly successful. The agreement at that time was that Emma would have the babies, she cleaned the house, she did all of the shopping, Emma cooked the meals, she got the children off to school, she read all of the bedtime stories, tucked them in at night, and at the end of every day, she was dog tired. Ted was not there to help her with the children or any of the housekeeping, but he said, when I retire, we'll travel. I'll live wherever you want to live. You will be the boss and I will do whatever you want to do. And they talked about maybe they would go to New York and live for 3 months, and maybe Washington, D.C., or they would get a condo on one of the San Juan Islands and they would be there for 6 months. So she always looked forward to that. She always planned on it. But then Ted didn't retire. He loved his work and he continued to work long past retirement age. In 2008, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And Emma's initial response was, this is your disease, pal. It's not mine. It's going to be up to you to manage it. You make your doctor's appointments. You figure out what you need for medications. This is not going to change my life. She called me and told me about that. And I said, well, let's meet for coffee. So we sat down and we talked. And I had brought a file of information about Parkinson's with me. And when I tried to hand it to her, she said, no, I am not interested. This is Ted's problem. It is not mine. Well, evidently he got the message because he really took this on as his responsibility. He exercised every day. He stayed mentally positive, and he applied the same principles of hard work toward managing his Parkinson's as he always had toward his career. But regardless of how hard he tried, the disease progressed. The tremors got worse. His muscles continued to get stiffer. He had a lot of difficulty swallowing. His voice got weaker. He started falling, stumbling and falling more often. He had a terrible time sleeping. And a couple of years had passed, and they started going to a counselor. And after several sessions, Emma said, you know what? We come in here every single week and we only talk about how Parkinson's is affecting Ted. And I am sick and tired of spending this entire hour talking about how he's managing it. I am losing my husband a day at a time, an inch at a time, and nobody is talking about how I feel. And if we're not going to talk about us as a couple and how this is impacting me, I'm not coming back. So I met Emma for coffee again. And I said, well, good for you. I said, I think you've moved out of denial and into anger. And she said, what are you talking about? And I said, Emma, I'm not an expert here, but I think you may be going through some stages of grief. And when we normally think about grief, we think about the grief a person experiences after a loved one dies. But when someone we love has a progressive and degenerative disease like Parkinson's, we are grieving the loss of them and their abilities over a long period of time. Um, and obviously, at the beginning, Emma was in denial. She was like, this disease is not going to impact me. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is the known expert on grieving, and she talks about the 5 stages of grief after a person loses someone that they love. And as I have gone through this process with Emma, I have seen her go through the same stages at different times, some of them all at the same time, but in the beginning it was denial. And then came the anger, and boy, was she mad. And then comes the bargaining. It's like, okay, well, I see that this is happening, so here's what we're going to do about it. Here's how I can make it okay for me. Then the depression is the 4th stage, and finally, acceptance. So Parkinson's had become a constant and unwanted partner in their relationship. It followed them wherever they went. They could not get away from it. It created confusion when Ted sat down and tried to pay bills and manage their investments. It just really messed everything up. It interfered with their sleep, and it was relentless. And Emma thought, well, we just need to get away from it. So she said, you remember, you promised we would have big adventures when you retired, and it's not too late. I want to move now. She made up her mind that she wanted to go into a high-end retirement or continuous care community in Seattle. And that way, as his disease progressed, she could still have the freedom to travel, to create her own life, and she could leave him where he would be safe. Well, it was not what Ted wanted. And he said, no, 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 I don't want to leave here. I don't want to leave our friends. I don't want to leave our community. I don't want to leave our home. I am comfortable here. And she said, okay, fine. She said, you don't have to go with me. I will go by myself. And then Ted said, okay, you're right. I did promise. I'll do whatever it takes to make you happy. So they went to Seattle and they looked at high-end retirement and continuous care communities. And she realized this was going to be very, very, very expensive. And she decided she had to give it up. It wasn't going to be in the works for them. And when she did that, she reached stage 4, which was depression. And she was just wallowing. She said, all of my plans and my dreams for retirement are dead. and it's all Ted's fault. So Emma and I went for a walk, and she said, I'm going to leave him. And I just tried to reason with her. I said, this is not the time to do that. It is just going to be so difficult at your age and stage in life. You will be the bad guy. The children will turn against you. Everyone will have sympathy for him. You need to figure out how to work this out. So she did leave him, but for just 2 weeks. She went to an island by herself and rented a little cottage. She read books about mindfulness. She learned to meditate. And then she realized that all of the time that she had been waiting for Ted, that she had done some pretty remarkable, actually not pretty remarkable, she had done some very remarkable things on her own and created a successful life while she was waiting for Ted to make her happy. And she realized that she didn't need for him to make her happy, that she was obviously very capable of doing what she wanted to do on her own. So she finally accepted the responsibility for her own happiness, and she reached a stage of acceptance. It was a long journey. He was diagnosed he was 78 when he was diagnosed. So, do you think Emma was an angel? Um, Probably not. Do you think she was a witch? Actually, she's human. And I can tell you, as being a very dear friend of mine, this has been a really difficult journey for both Ted and Emma. They have had their challenges, and still they love one another. Recently, Ted was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia. I sat down and talked to him one day and I said, how are you? And he said, I'm sad and I'm scared. His mind was always, always his greatest asset. And he said, I feel less important, less appreciated, less needed. He feels isolated and alone and sad a lot of the time. He's given up driving, which is a good thing because he was a terrible driver before the Parkinson's. And he's stopped, finally, he has stopped fighting for control. Emma and I met again for coffee recently, and I wanted her perspective of where she was at this point. It's 12 years later after the first diagnosis. And she said, I realized that we don't come into Parkinson's disease with a clean slate. Every relationship has its own history. And based on the history of how you have treated one another through the years, on the relationship that you've had, on the grudges that you hold, on the love that you have experienced, that's going to affect how you both manage Parkinson's going forward. Now she is striving to really be patient and kind, and she's blaming the disease, not Ted. At one point, she was so mad at him because he wouldn't smile or act like he was happy when he came through the door. And I said, Emma, what you don't understand is facial masking. And if you would learn more about Parkinson's, you would learn that the muscles in his face are frozen. And she was like, oh. So she went home and she told him, you know what? If you are happy to see me when I come home, then you better start telling me because I can't tell by looking at your face. Ted is trying to be more thoughtful of Emma's needs, and she has chosen to forgive him, and she decided to stay. It's not going to be easy, but I am confident that they will get through it. They just celebrated Ted's 90th birthday. They were going to have a big, big party, and then they had to cancel it because of COVID-19. So he has started planning for his 100th birthday. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if he got there, because of his determination and now because of the peace in the relationship. I think their future together looks maybe as bright or brighter than it ever has. And now I want to talk about Sybil and John. I only met Sybil. I never met John. But when she first contacted me, she just was trying to figure out, how can I get our old life back? Her husband had been a physician, and now her strong, intelligent, capable husband couldn't figure out. He had walked into the bathroom and he looked at the stool and he called her and he said, I know I should know this, but how does this thing work? And she absolutely fell apart. She is sad, but she's also in denial. She does not want to accept what's happening. She desperately wants to turn the clock back. And when I talk to her about what are the potential fixes for this, I mean, what can she do so that she isn't so overburdened with all of the work? As all of you know, that when a loved one starts experiencing physical and mental deficiencies, then the caregiver has to take on more and more and more of the responsibility. And John and Sybil lived on a large property out in the country. There was a tremendous amount of maintenance that he had always helped with, and now he wasn't capable of doing it. And so I said, would you consider selling that property and moving to a smaller one? And she said, no, I'm going to stay here until I don't have a choice. So when she can no longer manage, she said she will figure out what to do next. I haven't talked to Sybil in a while, and I thought, as I was getting ready for this presentation, I wish I could find her number to find out how she is doing, but I just don't know. So now I want to tell you about Mary and Dan. And Mary and Dan are very close friends of ours. They met about 25 years ago, the same year that I met my husband. They were both older. They had both been married before. They had both had successful careers. They married and I'm sorry, they did not marry. They did not marry. I married. And they just decided to be permanently engaged. So for 23 years, they shared wonderful adventures. They traveled all around the world. They had a fabulous life. And then Ben fell. He fell inexplicably down their stairs and he was injured. And he did that a couple of times. But then the last time he was really seriously hurt and she had to call an ambulance. They took him to the hospital, and in addition to all of the broken bones, they got this horrible diagnosis. The doctor said, you have supraneural palsy. And some of you know that that is a terrible diagnosis. So they had just come back from a trip to Russia, and they had come to our house for a visit. And I noticed that there was something off with his speech. And when Mary and I went for a walk, I said, has he had a stroke? Is there something going on? And she said, no, there is something going on. We just don't know what it is. And then it was just a few months after that that he had this fall and he got this diagnosis. So Mary went to acceptance immediately. She put him into an excellent assisted living facility. They knew that he was never going to be able to come home. He accepted it immediately. And so the only thing that Mary had trouble with is that she believed she could continue to live her life the way she had lived it with Dan before he fell and before he moved into assisted living. And I talked to her one day and she said she was exhausted. And I said, well, tell me what you're doing. And she said, well, I belong to 3 book clubs. I do water aerobics every day. I'm continuing to counsel high school students on their college admissions. She volunteered for multiple organizations. She is an artist, and so she was still spending time doing her artwork. And then she felt that it was important for her to go to the assisted living facility and spend 5 or 6 hours a day with Dan. And of course, my response was, of course you're exhausted. And after a few weeks of doing everything, she was stressed out and she was tired. And she realized she couldn't keep this up. So it's been a year since Dan went into assisted living, and his condition is progressing, and he now requires around the clock care. They have 4 caregivers. Mary is one, his son, Dan's son is one, and then they have 2 hired caregivers. So even though the facility is cut down or closed down because of COVID-19, she can still go and spend time with him. So I talked to her yesterday and I said, how are you doing? And she said, I'm good. I'm doing quite well. And I was surprised to hear that, but I said, so tell me, what are you doing to keep yourself well? And she said, well, I'm working my ass off. And I laughed and I said, all right, tell me about that. She said, it's my brain. She said, I realized that I have to work on my brain every single day because this is the thing that is going to get me through this. So she meditates for 30 minutes every day. She practices Tai Chi every day. She goes for a walk every day. And most importantly, she is thinking positively. She is working to manage her stress. And she's controlling her attitude. And she said, the only thing that I am in charge of is my attitude. I'm keeping it positive because I don't want to go down the tubes. They both realize that Dan may not live long, but they are both feeling peaceful. He feels loved, he feels lucky, and he feels at peace, knowing that his life isn't going to last long, but it is as good as it can possibly be at this point. And now I want to introduce you to Jenny and Matt. Jenny was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's, and she had always been the life of every party. She was high energy, happy, exuberant person. She was a teacher and she loved teaching. She was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's, and it threw her into a tailspin. She worried about the future. What is this going to be? What is this disease going to do to us? She was worried that she would become a burden to Matt, and she didn't want to do that. She was worried about how it would affect her kids. She was able to continue teaching, and then her symptoms got worse. And she was angry about her worsening tremors. And the kids at school started making fun of her to her children. They would say, "Your mama shakes funny," and they would imitate her. And of course, that upset her children. So she ended up having deep brain stimulation, and it worked. The shaking stopped. She was actually able to continue working for 20 years. And then her PD started causing constant falling. and she was forced to retire. She felt angry, cheated, and depressed. And Jenny was a positive person. And she decided, okay, I have to see the glass half full. It's my choice. I can see it half full, I can see it half empty. So she actually started volunteering to help others. And I met her when I spoke at the Parkinson's conference in Cincinnati last year. And she's very involved in planning these conferences and in um, creating support groups and programs for other people with Parkinson's. And she just absolutely is still a ball of fire, even though she has to walk with a walker and a lot of her physical abilities have been challenged. I spoke with her husband, and he said, I just wish I could get her to slow down. And I said, how has it affected you? And he said, well, she still wants to do everything. She still wants to have these big family gatherings. And so she plans it. We go buy the groceries, and then she starts cutting up the fruit, and she can't do it because she doesn't have the strength in her hands. So everything that she had planned to do to host a gathering or a party, I end up having to do. And he said, what he has noticed is that the person with PD often becomes self-focused, that they are thinking about what they can do or what they can't do or how they are feeling. And he said that her needs are always in the spotlight and his needs have to play a lesser role. He has gradually taken on more of the load. And sometimes he feels like Jenny is absolutely oblivious to his needs, that she's going forward in her life and she's absolutely not paying attention to how her actions sometimes affect him. So both partners are figuring out that they have to rebalance their relationship. They are constantly negotiating new rules about what he can do, what he's willing to do, what she's capable of doing, and where they need help. And Jenny finally agreed that she would stop feeling compelled to lead every parade and to be the life of every party. She agreed not to fill every single day with activities. And I really identified with Jenny, and I felt sorry for her. And it brought up a similar argument in our house that I shared. So my husband and I married later in life. Alex had 5 children. I had 3, which means that when we got everybody together with spouses and grandchildren, we had about 30 people. And I loved big gatherings. And so we would get everybody together for Christmas. And 2 of his children had come and stayed, and they were with us for 2 weeks at Christmas. And after it was all over, I went into the living room and to talk to him, and I was expecting him to pat me on the back and tell me how wonderful I was and how much he appreciated everything I had done to make the Christmas special. But that wasn't the conversation he had. He said, next year, I'm going someplace warm. And I said, you didn't enjoy Christmas? And he said, no, I didn't. And I said, so what do you think the problem is with it? And he said, well, it's you. You make such a big deal out of everything. And I said, excuse me? And he said, yeah, you just make such a big deal out of it. And I said, okay, great. I reacted thoughtfully and calmly, I think, as most women would in that situation. And then I said, so how do you not make a big deal out of having 30 people for Christmas Day dinner and having company for 2 weeks in a row? And he said, you just stop doing it. You just don't. And my initial reaction was, okay, fine. This is going to cost you plenty, pal. But then I had to ask myself, do I really love these huge gatherings? And I realized I was actually tired of all of the shopping and the cooking and the serving over a 2-week period of time. And did I mention the laundry when you have company for that long? So we now have smaller gatherings, and we have found that we can actually connect with one another, and it becomes about being with them, being present, and not just managing all of the logistics. So Parkinson's does limit energies and abilities, but it doesn't have to stop couples from enjoying life. We just have to make adjustments, and these are ongoing adjustments as the disease progresses. Jenny and Matt moved to a smaller house. They hired a housekeeper. They paid someone to maintain the yard. It isn't always easy, but both partners have agreed that this is give and take. So, why tell these stories? Well, Jenny told me that Parkinson's is like a snowflake. Each person's experience is unique. You cannot control the progression. Like Ted, sometimes it goes slow. Or like Dan, it can move like it is on fast forward. Your relationship might look like this most of the time, some of the time. Some days it might look like this. But regardless of your relationship history, you are in this together, because Parkinson's is not a one-person disease. It creates a constant tug of war between what you want to do and what you can do. It's a challenge to balance the needs of both partners. Each partner battles with emotions, and our better angels don't always win. We need to accept and understand that and realize that if we lose it today, we will have an opportunity to apologize and do it better tomorrow, or to renegotiate, or to rebalance, or to do whatever we need to do to keep going forward. And if you can care for yourself and for each other, the path will be a little bit smoother. So I want to talk now again about creative indifference. For those of you who have been on these webinars before, you know this is the foundation of what I talk about. And the steps are becoming aware of the people, situations, and the conditions that are most upsetting to you. Writing these things down will provide clarity. It will allow your subconscious mind to stop working on them and waking you up in the middle of the night. And it can give you an opportunity to either address what you need to do to get rid of this problem, or it will let you know what the source of the problem is, whether it's a situation or a person, and that provides the clarity. Now, acceptance. This is the hardest piece of any disease or any situation over which we have no control. And I was thinking about that this morning, that my husband and I have lived in our house since 2003. And there were 4 days when we were snowbound about 7 or 8 years ago when we did not leave the house. And now during COVID-19, we have been here for a month without going out, without being with friends, without seeing our grandchildren or being with our kids. And in the beginning, it was hard, but then we thought, okay, there is nothing we can do to change the impact this virus could have on us. So we accepted that this could be a very long time, that we needed to stay home in order to stay safe. And we've been doing house projects every day. I've been creating new webinars. We've been having Zoom conferences with our friends and with our children and grandchildren. And it's a different way of living. This is not what any of us would have planned or would like, but we have a choice. We can either accept it or we can deny it and we can fight against it. And as I was thinking about all of these couples, I believe that once they accepted that Parkinson's was going to be a part of their life for the rest of their lives, that it became easier to live with it, to deal with it, to plan for it, and to manage it. And then, of course, the third step is to take action. You identify the things you can change, you make a plan, you execute the plan, and then when you identify things over which you have no power, authority, or control, you can either obsess over them or you can choose to release your emotional attachment to them. Now, just as a reminder, as we go through this isolation, it's important to maintain a routine. Parkinson's Support Center, and Erica is just doing a marvelous job at organizing activities. So those of you who are at home can still participate in the activities that you used to go and participate in with other people. So there are Zoom programs, the dance, Move It or Lose It, Monday and Thursdays at 9:30 a.m. Chair yoga is every Tuesday at 4:45 to 5:45. Music therapy is on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. And Fight Back with Fitness is on Mondays and Thursdays, Mondays at 6:30, Thursdays at 6. So I want to leave you with a gift from my mother. She said this at least 1,000 times. As long as I have the ability to think and reason, I will have the power to choose my attitude toward any person, thing, or event. And I believe that if we can adapt this, if we can accept that our attitude is a choice, that we can deal with almost any challenge or any difficulty, and we will come out stronger, kinder, more compassionate, and with more wisdom on the other side. So thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Erica, for all you are doing to help others.
Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful presentation. I am going to stop the recording now. So let's.
Okay.